They say there are two certainties in life, death and taxes. But how about three certainties? Add umbrella. Whether you're relaxing on the beach or wandering through the woods, an umbrella will save you from the sun or falling branches. Plus, unlike death and taxes, umbrellas are also an excellent way to dodge a poisoned dart. On July 27, 1947, that's exactly what happened to Pavel Sudoplatov. He was walking back to his dacha after shopping for his family when he felt something prick him in the neck. At first, he thought it was a mosquito, but then he realized it was something far more sinister. As he stumbled home, his wife rushed him to the hospital, but it was too late. Sudoplatov died soon after arriving. And while the Soviets suspected foul play, they didn't know who was behind it. What they did know was that Sudoplatov had been involved in some of the Soviet Union's most important espionage operations. That's why everyone from foreign spies to Stalin's enemies wanted him dead. But before we dive into this deadly mystery, a warning is in order. In today's video, we'll be discussing a sensitive topic, poisoning. While we'll only be covering it from a historical perspective, we understand that this subject matter can be disturbing. Please remember that if you or someone you know needs help, there are resources available. You can find helpful links below, so please take care of yourselves and each other. Now let's get started. Pavel Sudoplatov was born in 1898 in what is now Belarus. From early on, he displayed an aptitude for languages, which led him to study at the Moscow Institute of Foreign Languages. Unfortunately, his studies were cut short by World War I, which led to his conscription into the Imperial Russian Army. After serving for several years, he returned to civilian life and resumed his studies until his graduation in 1923. Once he finished, Sudoplatov joined the OGPU, the Soviet Union's chief security agency. His language skills made him a perfect fit for their foreign intelligence division. In 1926, Sudoplatov went undercover in Germany, where he met with various left-wing politicians and activists. This mission would prove very fruitful, as it would allow him to develop ties with key figures across Europe. These connections would prove invaluable later on during World War II, when he helped evacuate refugees from Nazi-occupied territories. For this effort, Stalin awarded him the Order of Lenin, one of the highest honors in the Soviet Union. However, Stalin would quickly grow tired of Sudoplatov relationship with the West. In 1938, he transferred Sudoplatov to the NKVD's counterintelligence department. Now, he spent his time rooting out suspected spies and traitors. However, this proved to be a thankless task. Even if he uncovered genuine threats, Stalin often took a keen interest in them, having many arrested and executed without any concrete proof. Needless to say, this caused Sudoplatov to burn out. He requested a transfer, which the NKVD happily obliged by sending him to the Far East to work in the Regional Security Department. While on the surface, this seemed like a demotion. It turned out to be a blessing in disguise. See, while working in the Far East, Sudoplatov fell under the radar, allowing him to avoid the Great Purge. To refresh your memory, this was the period between 1936 and 1938 when Stalin had over 1 million people executed or sent to gulags. If Sudoplatov had still been working in Central Russia, it's likely he would have been arrested and disappeared into the vastness of Siberia. Instead, he would spend the next 8 years building up the Far East's security apparatus. However, this peace was shattered when German troops invaded the Soviet Union. With the war raging across Russia, Sudoplatov realized that if he wanted to see action, he needed to return to headquarters. After requesting a transfer, he was given command of the NKVD's 13th Department. Now he was tasked with getting assets into Nazi-occupied territories. One of his most famous missions came at the end of 1943. During the Battle of Stalingrad, Germans had managed to occupy much of the city. This meant that civilians were trapped in the middle of a battlefield. Sudoplatov organized a group of NKVD agents and Red Army soldiers to rescue as many as possible. They would smuggle people out in trucks under the cover of darkness, taking them away from the front lines. Between November and December alone, this group rescued around 17,000 people. It was one of the largest evacuation efforts in the history of the Soviet Union. While such a large-scale operation was sure to attract attention, Sudoplatov wasn't interested in praise. He just wanted to get back to his normal routine. But unfortunately, that wasn't to be. Just a few months later, he was summoned to Moscow by Stalin himself. To this day, we don't know what was said during this meeting, but we do know that it would change Sudoplatov's life forever. 2 weeks after his meeting with Stalin, he was placed in charge of a special NKVD group known as the A Desk. Its purpose was simple: tracking down and eliminating targets of exceptional importance. It was a black ops unit of sorts. Unfortunately, we don't know who Sudoplatov's first target was, but we do know that he developed a reputation for efficiency and discretion. That's why he was put in charge of the Soviet Union's most dangerous assignment. In 1945, Joseph Stalin suffered a mysterious illness that threatened to kill him. Symptoms included fever, chills, weakness, and blood poisoning. Naturally, he wanted whoever was responsible brought to justice. Since the illness originated from a piece of meat, the Soviets assumed that it was food poisoning. But as Stalin grew weaker, it became clear that they needed outside help. Enter Major General Vladimir Vertrovsky, one of the Red Army's top military doctors. He would travel to the Soviet leader's dacha and personally treat him. While the treatment was successful, Verbitsky would discover another problem. During his stay, he noticed that Stalin's food was being prepared by a cook named Pavel Sudoplatov. As the two men shared a common last name, the general assumed that they weren't related, so he asked the cook to prepare him some soup. However, after eating, he immediately regretted this decision. The soup was terrible. Of course, Verbitsky understood that the cook was a nervous wreck due to cooking for Stalin, so he excused his performance. But as the days passed and Stalin remained ill, Verbitsky decided to visit the kitchen again. To his surprise, the cook was nowhere to be seen. This led the general to investigate and discover that the cook had fled to his native Estonia. Once Verbitsky informed the NKVD of this discovery, Sudoplatov was quickly arrested and brought to Moscow. It was here that Pavel Sudoplatov met his doom. On July 27, 1947, he was summoned to NKVD headquarters for an interview. After questioning him about his past, his interrogators informed him that he was going to be exiled to Kazakhstan. They told him to sign the papers right then and there, but when he looked closer, he noticed that the document said nothing about exile. Instead, it was his death sentence. Suddenly, everything clicked. When Stalin fell ill, it was obvious that someone poisoned him. But with so many people vying for the dictator's favor, it was hard to narrow down the suspects. As it turned out, Stalin's personal chef was an Estonian national, which made him an easy fall guy. Now the real poisoner could strike again, and the perfect candidate would be someone with access to Stalin's food, but who wasn't in the inner circle. And who better than Sudoplatov, a man with a suspicious background and no reason to stick around? It was the perfect framing. But how did Sudoplatov die? Well, that depends on who you ask. The official story is that Sudoplatov was injected with poison while signing the papers. But according to rumors, it was far more elaborate. Apparently, Sudoplatov was taken out into the courtyard and shot in the base of the neck, specifically the thyroid cartilage. This area is just below the Adam's apple and has a high density of blood vessels, meaning that he would bleed internally. Furthermore, the shot would have to be incredibly precise, just like the shot that killed President Kennedy. The bullet couldn't simply graze his neck. It had to hit him in the exact right spot. Then after they shot him, the assassins took Sudoplatov back inside and staged the scene. They put the documents in front of him and called in his wife. By the time she got there, her husband was already dead. But there is one final piece to this puzzle, and it comes from a surprising source. General Verbitsky, the man who ordered Sudoplatov's arrest, claimed that he was innocent. According to him, the real poisoner was none other than Lavrenti Beria, head of the NKVD and one of Stalin's closest confidants. After Stalin fell ill, Beria immediately jumped on the opportunity to eliminate his rivals. He used Sudoplatov as a scapegoat, all the while knowing that he would take the fall. However, there is little evidence to support this claim. In fact, it was Verbitsky alone who blamed Beria. In the end, it's impossible to know for sure what really happened. It's possible that Sudoplatov was truly innocent and was merely in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or maybe he was Stalin's poisoner and managed to frame an innocent cook. We may never know the truth. And on that note, today's video has come to an end. Before we go, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Also, please leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the case. As always, thanks for watching.